Are you a home buyer who's looking to make an offer on a house and suddenly you find out that the house already has multiple offers and the seller is asking for your highest and best offer? Well, stay tuned because today I'm going to explain what highest and best means and give you 6 strategies on how you can make your offer as competitive as possible. So keep watching. Hi everyone, it's Amy Solera with Keller Realty in Pittsburgh. In today's hot sellers market, it is not uncommon for buyers to come across houses that they're interested in and the house already has multiple offers and they're hearing phrases like highest and best. So today I want to give you 6 strategies on what you can do to make your offer as competitive as possible and also explain what highest and best means. So the term highest and best is whenever the seller received multiple offers and they're basically giving the buyers a deadline for when they can submit offers. So they'll say highest and best is due by 5 o'clock on Friday. So that means by 5 o'clock on Friday, anyone else still interested in making an offer, it needs to be submitted by that time. And after that point, no other offers will be considered and the seller will be choosing the best one off of what they already received. Okay, so before I go into the 6 steps, I first want to say talk with your real estate agent and tailor your offer based on your specific situation. Maybe pick and choose some of the tips that I'm going to give you because maybe they won't all work for you. Hopefully that'll help make your offer as competitive as possible based on your own ability. The second piece of advice before I go into the strategies is to first understand what the seller is looking to gain from this sale. Maybe they're relocating to another state and need to be there by a certain date. Maybe they're building a new house and they can't move in for 6 months, so they need a longer close date. Or maybe they're downsizing and they're moving into a retirement facility and they just don't want to deal with this and they just want a transaction that's as clean and easy as possible. So figure out what the seller is trying to gain from this situation and tailor your offer based on their wants and needs. Okay, tip number 1 is to get a mortgage pre-approval and submit it with your offer. Now, first of all, you should never be looking at a house unless you already have a mortgage pre-approval because that tells you what you're able to afford. But when it comes to submitting an offer, make sure that your pre-approval is updated and it matches the purchase price that you're offering. Tip number 2 is to offer more hand money. If you increase the amount of hand money that you're offering the seller, it shows that you have more skin in the game and also helps assure the seller that if you were to default, you would be losing extra money and they would be able to keep it. Tip number 3 is to have a flexible closing date. Now, this might not work for you if you're in a lease that you're in the process of getting out of, but it goes back to what I originally said with trying to find out what the seller is looking for out of this sale. But if the seller's looking to be in a new city within 30 days, then maybe tailor your closing date based on the 30 days. Or if they're looking to move in 6 months, maybe you have the ability to drag out the closing date for 6 months. So give the seller a flexible closing date. You can even write in on the sales contract something like seller chooses the closing date or closing date to be determined by the seller. Keep in mind though, if you are getting a loan, know that it takes about 30 to 45 days for the lender to process that paperwork. So if you're getting a mortgage, don't think that you can close in 2 weeks. Tip number 4 is to waive inspections and contingencies. I've never met a seller who wants to work with a difficult buyer. So if you're a buyer who's requesting a home inspection, pest inspection, checking to see if there's lead paint in the walls, you want to look at a flood zone and property boundaries, and oh, by the way, you want their firstborn child, then most likely, if the seller has multiple offers, they might choose a buyer to work with who would be easier. Choose the contingencies that are most important to you. Focus on the ones that would determine that the house is structurally sound, that there are no major defects that you're going to run into later down the road that are going to cost you thousands of dollars. And then let some of the other ones slide until after you own the house. Like property boundaries. If you want a survey done because you want to put in a fence for your dog, that can be done after the house is yours. Tip number 5 is to write a love letter. This is essentially a letter from the buyers to the seller. It personalizes the offer. You know, when the seller is just receiving a lot of offers and it's just numbers and paperwork and they don't know who's who, put the human side into the offer. Did you grow up down the street? Do you picture your kids running through the backyard of this brand new house and that's why you want it? This can be really important if a seller has lived in their house for 30 years, which is not uncommon in Pittsburgh. So maybe the seller's lived in the house for 30 years, they raised their children in the house, and they just want to know that the buyers are going to love the house and take care of it as much and as well as they did. I actually remember that I toured a house where the seller had all of these photo albums lying out on the counter for us to look at, pictures of their children growing up in the house. You could tell these people really loved their house and it was really important to them that the next buyer also loved it as much as they did. And I've actually had offers accepted not because they were the highest, but because the seller felt a real connection with the buyer after reading their letter. So it might sound kind of foo-foo, but it actually does work. And finally, tip number 6 is my favorite, and that is use an escalation clause. I'm going to go into this in more detail in next week's video, but essentially an escalation clause is an addendum and it's a tiered approach to how much money you're offering. So rather than just blindly offering extra money when you know that there are other offers on the table, it's a tiered approach and it really protects the buyer, and it's my favorite thing to use. So if you like this video and you found it useful, give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button so that you don't miss next week's video about the escalation clause.